I am Seth Grimes. I'm a consultant and analyst around emotional technologies, and I'm here today with Greg Hedges from Rain. Greg, I hope you're doing well.
I am, yes. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk today and at the conference as well.
Yeah, so I'm producing the Emotion AI conference coming up on May the 5th online. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but for starters, why don't you tell us what your company, Rain, does?
Sure. So to give a bit of context, as Seth mentioned, Greg Hedges, Chief Experience Officer at Rain. I oversee our strategy and our user experience departments. And so we are a voice-focused company at Rain. And our core services are in helping brands and companies form their voice strategy. And when we say voice, that can mean a lot of different things. There's the immediate that comes to mind, which might be the Amazon Alexas and the Google Assistants of the world. But we think about it in the kind of, what we say capital V of voice, but anything where a conversational experience is being implemented or brought into or thought about in terms of how you might want to communicate with your consumers, we help brands think through that. So that might include voice search optimization. It could include maybe sonic branding, or even we've helped some brands think about synthetic voices. And it could just be in terms of how you think about conversational content in general. So helping brands think through their approach to conversations. And yeah, that's kind of where we are from Rain.
Yeah. So your website, which is rain.agency, by the way, you talk about having three elements, which are creative, strategy, and engineering. I'm kind of interested in the engineering in particular, at least today. We talk about conversational AI. What does conversational AI mean to Rain, and how do you implement that in your solution set?
Sure. Yeah. So as we think about conversational AI, I think the majority of the experiences that we build as we think about technology that we implement are for some of the platforms like Alexa and Google Assistant, Bixby. We've helped both Bixby from Samsung's perspective, but also some brands consider, is it the right place for them to start? But kind of thinking through these more platform based approaches. And as we think about conversational AI, for me, and from where I sit thinking about the strategy side and the user experience side of it, mainly it's thinking through what is the actual tone of the conversation take? What's the important, more important even before that, what are the needs of the people on the other end of the conversation, which relates to what I'm going to be talking about at the conference. But we need to be thinking about what are those things that are driving them into a conversation. What are their pain points? What are they trying to get out of it? And of course, there's the other side of it, which is what are we trying to get out of the conversation? And how do we find a way to make those two worlds work? Because we cannot just kind of force someone down a path if we're going to have a meaningful conversation and a meaningful dialogue with them. We've got to kind of acknowledge where they're coming in at, be prepared for them to come at it a bunch of different places, and then allow the journey to be guided, certainly, so that it's fruitful for us, but make sure that it's fruitful for them in the end as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of, as we think about conversational AI, we're thinking about the places in which that's implemented, which could be through a smart speaker. It might be through a website or an app. So we think about not just voice coming from these smart speakers, but also how is voice going to be part of the overall digital ecosystem that a brand lives in. And so voice should find itself in a website. It should find itself in an app. There are plenty of ways in which assistants are doing that already from a brand perspective, not just from these kind of third-party platform perspectives. But yeah, I don't know if that helps answer your question or if that even created more, but yeah.
Well, you actually make me think of more and more questions, which is actually a good thing. So at the conference, at the Emotion AI conference, your talk is titled The Design of Emotionally Intelligent Voice Experiences. You talk about the use of empathy, building emotional connections, but turning those into deeper relationships. Can machines really do that?
Yeah, I think, from an empathetic perspective, you don't often think of a machine being empathetic for sure. But,
Well, simulate empathy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing to think about, like the machines in your question here, they're conduits, right? Like they're a way to get, and they're kind of the way that we get to the other side of the conversation. They're the form through which it happens. But the devices themselves, they're static, they're stoic, they're impersonal. But the assistants that are embedded in with them, or the voices that are inside of them, are certainly trying to bring some personality into the mix. The actual experiences that we're building, so the ones that we focus on at Rain, and that other developers that are working in voice and designers are thinking about, they're built by humans. The words are written by humans. The way that we handle and prepare our content, and even the premise through which they exist, is based off of hopefully human needs. And so they certainly can be imbued with empathy, and can be prepared to understand where someone is, what brought them there, and that can be prepared to share a sense of emotion through the words that they use, the sounds that are a part of them, and the words that we put into the mouth of those assistants. So yeah, I think if we're coming from a planning perspective, and also from a design perspective, and understanding the person and the people that we're hoping to speak with, then they definitely can be imbued with empathy and are capable of doing that. And I think that's one of the problems right now. There's a lot of like functional and utilitarian experiences that are out there because it makes sense, right? Like I can turn my lights on with my voice. I can order, something very quickly with my voice.
Transactional. Yeah, that's transactional.
Yeah, exactly. So the transaction, I think as you think about a transaction, it's not very emotional.
Relationship. It's not a transaction. Isn't a relationship.
Exactly.
Brands all want to be distinctive. They're distinctive in their logos, in the colors that they use. Are the brands and other clients you work with, are they looking to create distinctive voices in their interactions with people through the various devices? Is that something you're trying at this point?
Yeah, sometimes again, there's a dial to it all. So sometimes it's, not that they're looking for a brand new voice. What does it actually, the synthetic voice sound like? Although some are. They want to have something that's ownable, and they don't want to defer all their brand equity into an established voice of Amazon or Google that's out there. Some of it's just about like establishing tone. And I think people know this is not something that's going to go away. I think we've been able to kind of break through that with a lot of the clients that we've worked with. They understand that that voice technology is a new modality that's going to be around for quite a long time, and that it's going to be in more places than keyboards can or are, because it can be, and therefore they kind of need to understand what their roadmap for that's going to be. And so it may be down the road a synthetic voice might make sense for a brand, but right now it might be figuring out what's our tone. A lot of brands haven't even figured that out yet. Like, what do we sound like? What do we, when we are having a conversation, what should that be like? And, in reality, they've done some of that, but it's all in these disparate parts. They've thought about it for their call center, or they thought about it for, their website copy, but they haven't thought about it from a conversational standpoint. And so we come in and we can help brands think about that, and then start to figure out what their voice sounds like. And then down the road, certainly, what's the synthetic voice? How does that play out as part of the conversation?
Yeah, this sounds really interesting. I'm curious about one thing. You'd think that as people have fewer and fewer face-to-face meetings because of the COVID-19 crisis, that they'll be relying more and more on voice interfaces, and people are working from their homes, where they're much more likely to have an Alexa device or a Google device than they are at their offices. Is this changing the work that you're doing at Rain, or do you anticipate it changing in response to the crisis and our different work styles over the next 6 months, year?
Yeah, I think, you hear a lot about what the new normal is going to be like. And I guess we're all shooting off.
About that.
Yeah, we're all shooting off the hip a little bit, in terms of, what's that actually going to look like? Because until it's in the moment, I don't know. There's plans, and then there's reality. And I think, clients that we've worked with have been affected by this. Supply chains have been shut down, or, we work with a lot of companies. Like we work with the Wynn Hotel out in Las Vegas. They're completely, closed to business right now. The live venues, we worked with people in spaces where they can't open their parks, or they can't do other, events that they're working towards. So I think, there's going to be a change that occurs. And I think when you think about it from a behavioral standpoint, what we expect, and I don't know what will happen, but what we expect is that, people are going to start asking questions themselves. Do I really want to touch that screen? Do I want to touch that elevator button?
Yeah.
They're getting trialed into things like online education, and some of it, I've read a story yesterday where there's a revolt in some cases. They want to be back in person and who wouldn't on the college campus. But some people are seeing, I could do this could work for me. And so we're seeing that, there's all these questions people are starting to ask, and, how consumers are going to interact with the world while providing a protective bubble around themselves. And until it's safe again, that's going to be really interesting to navigate. And so we think voice can certainly play a critical role there. We're preparing to help brands with that and kind of answer those questions. And whether that's to access information or to hear something, to call something up on a screen, when you're in a place where you used to touch a kiosk, and now you might need something else. Maybe it's about even thinking about going up. I had to go to Home Depot over the weekend to pick something up, to fix something that was going on in the house. And, I'm wearing a mask and I'm trying to communicate with somebody, but I'm not sure how close I want to get even, and so people are going to have to, to navigate those situations. So how do we use voice? How do we use the infrastructure that we've already got laid out for us? We've got our phones in our pockets or wherever we carry them. We've got AirPods in our ears. So the access to the microphone's right there for a lot of people, not everyone, but certainly close by. And so how can we use that infrastructure to bring brands into that protective bubble, as opposed to allowing that to push everything else away?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be where we play a good portion of the future.
No question that all of us want to regain the person-to-person contact that we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it seems that you and your company are very well positioned to help organizations respond now to the changed environment, and it's great to hear that you're thinking ahead. So let's wrap it up here for now. I'm looking forward to your presentation at the Emotion AI conference. So Greg Hedges from Rain, that's rain.agency. Thanks for the conversation today, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.